Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. All right, everybody, I'm back. Good to be back, and I do want to not really switch gears. I want to stay on topic here, and I want to talk a little bit of college basketball coaching carousel, okay? So this is obviously like a crazy busy time of year for all things college basketball. We got conference tournaments going on. We got auto bids being handed out. We will have a bracket on Sunday. But at the same time, we also have the opposite of that as well. We have these teams that are fighting and clawing to get in, and some of them aren't even close. Some of them clearly are looking at teams in their conference and saying, we're not good enough, we got to make a coaching change, and that is part of what goes on in March as well. Talk about March Madness is the college basketball coaching carousel. Obviously, just a few days ago on the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, I talked a lot about Tom Crean being out at Georgia, who could be potential candidates there. We've talked about Maryland. We've talked about Louisville. And on Friday, another relatively, I think, good job opened up in the Missouri Tigers as they fired Cuonzo Martin after 5 years. And I'll say this about, the Cuonzo Martin experience. This was one, I'll be honest, I could see where it could go either way, right? Like Tom Crean had to go. Like Tom Crean was just terrible. But Cuonzo Martin, obviously, 5 years at the school. He did make 2 NCAA tournaments, but 0 NCAA tournament wins. And really, after, to be blunt with Cuonzo Martin, he was hired to bring in Michael Porter, who obviously he was able to. Michael Porter was not able to play very much at Missouri. He was banged up basically the entire season there. And so I only bring it up simply to say that I actually thought Cuonzo Martin's first year on the job in the 2017-2018 season was probably his best coaching job. No Michael Porter, you still get Missouri to the NCAA tournament, but he could never really capitalize from there. 4 more years after the Michael Porter experience, 3 losing seasons. Last year they did make the NCAA tournament, but fell apart late, lost in the first round. So 5 years, 2 NCAA tournaments, 0 NCAA tournament bids, with 3 losing seasons mixed in, and it just felt like there wasn't much to sell coming back. That's always part of what I talk about in terms of why do you want to bring a guy back? Is there a justification? Is there something you can sell, a reason to think it's going to get better? You finish strong. A great freshman class. You've killed it in the portal. You've had a ton of injuries. You look at somebody like NC State right now, Kevin Keatts. I mean, he can legitimately argue we finished in last place in the ACC. We had 5 scholarship players that were out with season-ending injuries at some point. We didn't play with a player bigger than 6'8". Give me my full roster before you make an evaluation on me. That's not to say Kevin Keatts is definitively going to save his job, but it's a conversation. There's a reason to bring back Kevin Keatts. I didn't really see it at Missouri. With that said, we're going to get to candidates in a minute, but I'll say this. I think it's a really interesting job, the University of Missouri. This is a program that has had real success, real NCAA tournament runs, 5 Elite Eights in their school history, including 2 this century, 2002 and 2009. It's not that long ago that this was a program that was playing to go to a Final Four in Phoenix against my UConn Huskies in 2009. Damari Carroll, Mike Anderson was the head coach. But it's also what is also true as well. This program really has not been the same since they entered the SEC. 2 NCAA tournament bids, as I said, 0 of them, 0 NCAA tournament wins dating back to 2010. So it has been a while for Missouri, but I do believe with the right coach, there's a lot of players in that Missouri area, and you can kind of recruit the Midwest in a way that a lot of schools in the SEC cannot, right? Like Alabama, Florida, Georgia, they're not flying to the Midwest. They're not flying to Chicago to get players in, for their programs. But Missouri, there is kind of a big geographical footprint that a lot of other SEC schools either can't or don't recruit. So with that said, let's get to some candidates here. And the first name, I'll tell you, this name is really picking up steam, I believe, and I believe he is a legitimate candidate at the University of Missouri. And that's Shawn Miller, former Arizona head coach. And it's interesting, right? Obviously, anybody who follows my work, if you don't follow my work, I did have Shawn Miller on my podcast a few weeks ago. And we kind of talked, like big picture, a lot of different stuff. I'm not advocating for him for this job because he came on my podcast. I really do think he's a candidate. But obviously, look, Shawn Miller, we know how things ended at Arizona. But I asked Shawn Miller about coaching again, and he said, look, obviously there's an ongoing investigation. It will be resolved in the next few months. But based on the facts that we have, I don't believe that it should preclude me from jobs. Now, of course, he has to say that, but if you look at the history of the NCAA investigations, kind of what he's accused of, what he is actually accused of, as opposed to what you may have read, rumors, innuendo, whatever, it doesn't appear as though it's going to be a lengthy suspension. And so then, if you're Missouri, you just have to decide, are you willing to kind of put up with whatever the punishment might be that comes down? Because on the other end, you're going to win a lot. I keep using this example, but I think it's important. 5, 6, 7 years ago, when Bruce Pearl was hired at Auburn, somebody wrote an article somewhere criticizing the school. I don't know who that guy or girl was that wrote that article at the time, but they look pretty stupid now because ultimately you got a winner in Bruce Pearl at Auburn, and you're going to get a winner at Shawn Miller, and that's why I believe that he is a realistic candidate at Missouri. Missouri, bottom line, end of story, end of day, is tired of getting their brains beat in by everybody in the SEC. They're tired of getting their brains beat in by Eric Musselman. They're tired of getting their brains beat in by John Calipari. They're tired of getting their brains beat in by Rick Barnes and Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl. They just want a guy who wins, and Shawn Miller is that guy. I've said the stats. I'll keep saying it. I know that Arizona fans are upset that he didn't get them to a Final Four. But you look at what he has done at Arizona and prior to that at Xavier. 7 Sweet 16s, 4 Elite Eights. You mean to tell me that Missouri would not sign up for half of that from Shawn Miller? And so when I look at him, I believe he is the best candidate because he's the only candidate that has done it at the highest of high major levels. He's the only guy that has gone into homes and recruited against the best programs in college basketball, whether it's Kentucky, UCLA, whomever, and he has put a winning product on the floor. On top of that, what I would also say is, to me, let me even backtrack here for a second, because why I think he's a candidate, why I think he's picking up steam is what I said, is that Missouri fans are tired of losing. They say, we just want a guy that will put a team on the floor that can compete with the best. And that is what I believe Shawn Miller can do. And again, I know I said it a minute ago, there's obvious NCAA stuff, but one, a lot of it flat out isn't true. The other thing I would say is this. Shawn Miller, as somebody who lives on the West Coast, I just told you that with the UNLV stuff. What I can definitively tell you about Shawn Miller, I have talked to multiple assistant coaches and head coaches, for that matter, in Pac-12 country. They say that he was the most feared head coach recruiter that they have ever seen. Not all head coaches like to recruit. A lot of head coaches send in their assistants, do all the legwork, then I come in and close as the head coach. Shawn Miller, I was told, basically recruits like he's an assistant coach, but as a head coach. And I think there's something to be said for the current Arizona team that he's not coaching. Tommy Lloyd's doing an incredible job. It's not a criticism of Tommy Lloyd. But you look at Arizona, NCAA stuff was going on. They couldn't recruit American kids, so they go international and all of a sudden put together what is now the core of a potential national championship team. Not to take away from what Tommy Lloyd's done, but Shawn Miller recruited Kirk Risa. Shawn Miller recruited Ben Matherin. Shawn Miller recruited Azuolas Tubelis. Shawn Miller recruited Christian Koloko, and that is the core of this NCAA tournament team. Dalen Terry as well. So we'll see what happens with Shawn Miller. He's obviously going to have some detractors, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, he just might not be on the list of Desiree Reed-Francois for the reasons that I mentioned. But if I was hiring, go get Shawn Miller. He's going to get you good play. He's going to put a team on the floor that puts you in position to win games. He is going to make NCAA tournaments. And if you're Missouri, he is the closest thing to a guarantee as you can get. Beyond him, I think there's actually a couple very interesting candidates that Missouri could pursue if they don't want Shawn Miller, and they kind of fit the profile of what I said a minute ago, younger program builders, more, whatever, and that's kind of the profile that Desiree Reed-Francois has coming out of UNLV. The first name I think is really interesting. Niko Medved, the head coach at Colorado State. Colorado State is going to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large. They did lose in the Mountain West semifinals late Friday night, early Saturday morning. But a couple things. One, first of all, it's worth noting he had Colorado State in position to make the NCAA tournament last year. They were the second to last team out. If Georgetown and Oregon State hadn't stolen bids from the NCAA tournament, Colorado State would have been the last team in the NCAA tournament last year. And then on top of that, this year he has them absolutely rolling. They are now 24-5, and as I said, they're in position to get an at-large. Last I saw from Joe Lunardi, they were like a 6 seed. So you just talk about a resume that's really impressive this particular season. Niko Medved has it at Colorado. Beyond that, what I also think is interesting about him, couple things. One, first of all, he's got Midwest ties. He's kind of spent most of his career in kind of that, Midwestish area. I know Colorado is more Rocky Mountain, but he's not East Coast. He's not West Coast. He's kind of heartland, middle of America. Went to the University of Minnesota. Beyond that, he did spend a few years at Furman, but after that, spent a couple years before that, he spent a couple years at Colorado State as an assistant. Then he went to Drake, and really over the last couple years has built Colorado State. I also like the fact that he is a program builder. He is a guy that at Furman in year 1 won just 9 games. By year 4, they had won 23 games. Colorado State, 12 wins in year 1, 24 wins now at minimum in year 2, and that's if they don't pick up a win or two in the NCAA tournament. And the final thing that I really like about him, and it's interesting because I talked to Matt McMahon about this, the Murray State coach, the other day. What I like about him is that, I don't know if the Mountain West is really quote-unquote mid-major. Colorado State has better facilities in some cases than some high-major schools do. But I bring it up because what I like about him is his ability to build a program. Okay, that to me in this era of college basketball is important. And what I mean by building a program, recruit the right players, retain the players, get them better within your program. I think it was a really telling thing that last year, as I said, Colorado State was the first team out of the NCAA tournament, or second team out of the NCAA tournament, They returned their entire roster this year, and none of them left via the transfer portal, right? They had 4, 5, 6 guys that easily could have pursued other schools, other options if they were so inclined, but they believed in the program, they believed in the coaching staff at Colorado State, and they stayed at Colorado State. It's one thing to build a one-off winner at the Missouri low major level through transfers, and I'm not saying transfers are bad. It's the new world that we live in. But to recruit a group, get them better, develop them, and then they all stay because they believe in you, that feels really, really, really important to me. In terms of Medved, I'd say the only real thing that's kind of a downside, if you will, is that he's never really, really, really coached at the highest levels of college basketball. You look at his resume. I know I did mention that he did play go to the University of Minnesota, but you look at it, 1 year as an assistant coach at Minnesota. Other than that, it's been mostly at the low and mid-major levels. I'll just tell you, I'm not saying he's a good candidate, a bad candidate, whatever. I'm just telling you that bottom line is it is a different deal when you are stepping into a conference where you're recruiting against, John Calipari, Eric Musselman, Nate Oates, whatever. Shouldn't be a preclusion, by the way. Eric Musselman obviously came from the Mountain West like Nico Medved would. That's a little bit of a different deal because Eric Musselman has been all over in the pro ranks and stuff. Nate Oates also came from Buffalo and had immediate success. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but it should be something to at least consider. Really quickly, a couple other candidates. Jeff Linder. I think he's the other young, interesting, dynamic head coach from the Mountain West. For people who don't follow the Mountain West, okay, they're probably going to have 4 NCAA tournament teams. Colorado State, I just mentioned. Boise has locked up an NCAA tournament bid. San Diego State has locked up an NCAA tournament bid. I believe that Wyoming really should be in the NCAA tournament. They're coached by Jeff Linder. I don't know if they will be because you never know. Probably a little bit too close to the bubble for a lot of people is concerned. Wyoming's concerned, but they should be in. Right now they're sitting at 25-7. Lost in the Mountain West semifinals to Boise on Friday night. But when you look at Jeff Linder, very, very, very impressive resume. Like Nico Medved, has spent a lot of his career in the Midwest. He was an assistant coach at Boise. Did briefly go to Weber State where, oh, by the way, he had a little bit of an overlap with some guy named Damian Lillard. Then he was the head coach at Northern Colorado. Now he's the head coach at Wyoming. Like Nico Medved, I like the way he builds a program, right? Year 1, 11 wins, 18 losses at Northern Colorado. Year 2, 26 wins. Year 3, 21 wins. Year 4, 22 wins. Never did make an NCAA tournament there. But when you talk about a guy that had 3 straight 20-win seasons at Northern Colorado, that's nothing to be scoffing at. Year 1 at Wyoming is 14-11, and then year 2 in a normal season, 25-7 with what I believe to be an NCAA tournament team. And I just like the way this guy builds a program. And the thing I'll say about him too is he is known for having an elite eye for talent, okay? He is at least in part, and I'm sure everybody at Weber at the time is trying to take credit for it, but he is at least in part responsible for Damian Lillard going to Weber State. Beyond that, when he was at Boise, they recruited a couple guys that really developed into NBA players that really had no other real options coming out of high school. Chandler Hutchinson is one. Chandler Hutchinson was drafted by the Bulls there a few years ago, and Jeff Linder was the guy that helped get him there when really nobody else really seemed to have a ton of interest in him at the time. And once he's gotten to Wyoming, a couple really good finds there. Marcus Williams was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year. He transferred to Texas A&M this year. And also Graham Ike, who's really, really, really good as well. So that, to me, is the Jeff Linder deal. I think he's a really good coach. I think he's really dynamic. My only concern with him would be great eye for talent, great developer of talent. I just don't know how much of that you can do in the SEC, man. I think it's great to have this idea that we're going to develop guys and we're going to bring them in as freshmen, and by the time they're juniors, you better watch out. Yeah, good luck with that when Eric Musselman's bringing in multiple McDonald's All-Americans. Nate Oates is bringing in multiple McDonald's All-Americans. Rick Barnes, John Calipari recruiting the best of the best coming out of high school and the transfer portal. That would be my only concern, but I think Jeff Linder's a rising coach. I'll be very curious to see if he's a candidate at Missouri. Starting to wrap up, Kim English is an obvious name. Kim English really played for basically the last great Missouri team under Frank Haith back about a decade ago. That was the team that entered the NCAA tournament as a 2-3 seed, something like that. They unfortunately lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament to Norfolk State, but that was a team that, you look at that Missouri team, 30-5 in 2012, so it was exactly a decade ago. Again, that was in the final year, I believe, of the Big 12 for Missouri, but they won they won the conference tournament title, were a number 2 seed. They did end up getting upset, but Kim English obviously has ties to Missouri. He's now the head coach at George Mason. Listen, what I would say is a couple things with Kim English. He's 33 years old. A lot of people seem to like him. And I do think he got a lot of traction. I'll say this, he was the hottest candidate available about 3 months ago when they beat Maryland to start the season. Maryland was ranked in the top 15, top 20 at the time, and Kim English became a very hot candidate. The bottom line, though, is not very much after that 14-16, 7-9 overall in the A-10 in his first season. And what I would say is, listen, what Missouri ultimately does, I don't really care. But what I would also say is he's 33 years old, first-year head coach. He's going to be available in the future. I mean, even if you get the right guy, Shawn Miller's in his early to mid-50s. What do you get Shawn Miller for 10 years? So you get Kim English at around 40 instead of 33. It feels a little bit premature. If Missouri wants to go that direction, that's fine. Really doesn't matter to me. But I do think, 1 year's coaching experience, 14-16, going into a conference with Rick Barnes and John Calipari and all those guys that I've mentioned is really, really tough. Bruce Pearl, etc., Eric Musselman, Nate Oates. I just think it's really tough. Wouldn't be the first call that I make. And I do think there's something to be said about traditionally a guy that is really only a candidate at one major school. Very rarely does that work out. You think about football, like Clay Helton. When he was at USC, there's no Power 5 school in America that would have hired him. Didn't work out for Clay Helton. Obviously, Coach O was a little bit of a different deal, wins a national championship, but also struggled along the way as well. So I'm just saying, wouldn't be my first call, but I get why he is a candidate. I get why Missouri probably has to bark up that tree. And what I would also say is I do think there's going to be some traction and some interest in Kim English because of the ties to Missouri. And I do think there's going to be people in that administration that are really pushing to get him. Couple other names before we get out of here. Matt McMahon, Murray State is an obvious one. When you go 30-2, in the post-John Moran era, you're going to get buzz. Doesn't really feel like the perfect spot for him. Murray's obvious. He spent most of his career kind of in the southeast portion of the country. Feels like there's some ACC jobs that may open up that probably make more sense for him, and even some other SEC jobs that open up that may make more sense for him. A couple interesting other names. Jerome Tang, the Baylor assistant, obviously longtime Baylor assistant. There's going to be buzz to make a hire like this in the post-Tommy Lloyd world where Tommy Lloyd was the assistant at Gonzaga forever, had never gotten his opportunity. He comes to Arizona and had immediate success. Of course, Tommy Lloyd inherited a much, 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 much better situation than Jerome Tang would at Missouri. That roster needs a major, major, major overhaul. Jerome Tang is going to be a really good coach somewhere. I'm not sure if I was him that in the SEC right now, this is the job that I would take. And we'll wrap here. The last one's kind of an interesting name. Ben Mccollum, the Northwest Missouri head coach, 3 Division III national titles there. He's right in state. I think the problem with that becomes, Missouri recently went the D3 route. They hired one of their former players, Kim Anderson, about 10 or so years ago when Frank Haith left, and that did not work out. And so I do not think that there will be much of a thirst within that athletic department to hire a successful D2 head coach, but we will see. So that's the Missouri deal. What I would tell you, there's a difference between what I would do and what I believe Missouri will do. I would go get Shawn Miller. I would go get Shawn Miller because he's the only guy that has proven that he can recruit at that level what is needed to win at the highest levels of college basketball. I think they're probably going to go younger. I think they're probably going to go coach on the rise. That's Desiree Reed-Francois' type. The lady has a type. Give her credit. She's got a type. And it's young. It's personality. It's all that good stuff. Did it with TJ Outsberger. Did it with Kevin Kruger. My guess would be either Nico Medved or Jeff Linder. By the way, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube channel. Also, make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast.